Since I founded my company in 2020 and more recently my group program that helps women write and publish their memoirs, I have worked with dozens of people to get their stories out in books they can be so proud of. Books that keep their legacy alive, books that build their careers, books that they are proud to be the author of. But one thing that I see over and over and over and over is that the same mistakes keep cropping up that keep people from this noble goal that is so important to them. So today I want to talk about the top 5 mistakes that I see for first-time memoir writers. Stay tuned.
If you're writing a memoir, but you're not sure where to start, and let's face it, you're not really sure where you're going after you do get started, then you are not alone. Not having a plan for your memoir is one of the most common reasons I see that people fall off of these projects that they care about so deeply. And that's why my team created the Memoir Method checklist. This absolutely free download is going to take you through every single step along with the timeline, all the way from your seed of an idea all the way through holding that beautiful book in your hands. And you can download it at pageandpodium.com/checklist. Happy writing.
Now, I have mentioned on this channel many times that most people don't know any published authors. But when you're thinking about the number of people you know who have successfully written and published a memoir, that number is even lower. There are very specific hurdles of writing a memoir that just simply don't apply to our fiction writing friends or even our prescriptive self-help how-to book writing friends. And what that means is that so often when we set out to get that book out, our story on paper to help other people, we are just flying blind. We really don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And there are a lot of things that are just human nature that creep in and that happen over and over and over to different authors. If only we could talk to each other and know what they were, we would be in such better shape. So that's what I want to talk about today. What are the top 5 things that I see that are holding people's memoir back? Often to the point, by the way, that they have even given up. Number 5 is a really big one. But let's start with number 1. The number 1 most common problem that I see when people are writing their memoir is that they don't know where the story should start. Now, this is so understandable because so many of the people that I personally work with are people who are using their memoir to really kind of help others through a particular trauma, a difficult experience, a challenging life lesson to help other people go through the same thing. Now, this can be anything from a psychological trauma, something that was, really difficult maybe in your childhood that lasted into adulthood. It could be like Wendy Davis, The Fight You Don't See. It could be thinking about how does someone run for politics? What do I need to know before I start my campaign? It could be about a business. How do you found a successful business? Or in a lot of cases, right, how do you found a business that is not successful so that then you can try to turn it around and make it be successful? In all of these cases, all of the things that are coming before the story itself are really important. Let's take Wendy's book, for example, since I already mentioned it. So Wendy Davis is a politician who ran for office in Utah. She was not successful. She lost by 78 votes. It's a bit of a spoiler. This book is an excellent peek behind the curtain, behind the scenes of politics, so relevant during our current election cycle. But one of the things that brings this up as a really good example is that Wendy's journey into politics really begins when she decides to file to run for office, right? She goes to a fundraiser, she's kind of chatting with people. She's been thinking about running for a while, but she kind of needed a little boost. That fundraiser is it. She starts to announce, she files, etc., right? So that's all stuff that's happening. Really, the span of the book is about a year. It's pretty narrow little timeline. But when I started working with Wendy, one of the concerns that she really had was that we would not be able to find a way to incorporate all of the other things that had led her to this point. In Wendy's case, for instance, she grew up spending a lot of time near Hot Springs, Arkansas, around the time the Clintons were kind of coming up into national stardom. That was a really, really formative thing for her. There's a scene where she's kind of watching Bill Clinton give a speech in a Walmart parking lot in Hot Springs, Arkansas. An amazing thing, right? Most people don't get to see that. It really inspired her. She has memories of, watching the Challenger explosion and kind of being called to how do we make this country a better place? How do we kind of make it safer? And how do we kind of embrace the patriotism and the communal spirit that comes from disasters, tragedies like that? All of these examples of things from her childhood. Now, I gave her the advice that I am giving you now, which is just because you have things in your childhood that really do relate to and inform the story that you're trying to tell, does not mean that you have to start in childhood. So let me say that again. You may have things that happen from your childhood that are absolutely relevant to your book, but they shouldn't be the first things we read. And the reason is when people pick up a memoir, they crack that first page open and it says, when I was just 5 years old, they put it back on the shelf. It is totally understandable, and that is not to say anything about your particular childhood stories or Wendy's or any of ours. The thing is, when people pick up a book, for example, on running for political office, they want to open that book and start reading about running for political office. Most people will not wade through all the backstory, no matter how relevant it is, because remember, you know it's relevant. Your reader doesn't know it's relevant until you've made that case. So, the number one mistake that I see is that people will kind of make a list of all the things they want to include. That's great advice, by the way. You should do that. But then they will start chronologically at whatever the earliest memory is. Don't do that. Instead, what I suggest is that you pick the time to start, which is the day that something is different, and that different something led you to this adventure at the heart of the book. When you start there, in Wendy's case, it's filing for political office. It might be in the case of, a trauma recovery story. It might be kind of the point at which the trauma became so severe that you couldn't avoid it anymore. In the case of a business memoir, it may be kind of the day that you founded your business. Start there. And then you can take all of those earlier chronological events, weave them in thematically wherever they fit in the span of that story. So what we're going to do is, rather than ask our reader to wade through our whole life story, which would really be more of an autobiography. Most of us are not sort of celebrity enough that people would want to read our autobiography, right? So instead of starting in our childhood, we're just going to use our childhood as sort of pieces of evidence, pieces of context, flashbacks, things that are going to inform those later events. It will make the later events feel richer. It will help your reader understand you better, which of course, that's why we read memoir, right? And it is going to overall just make your story, make your book feel much tighter and much more intentional and much more professional. Okay, so that's the first thing. Do not start in your childhood, unless, of course, the whole memoir is about your childhood. Most of the time, that's not the case. We want to start at the first day that something was different, and that something led you into the adventure at the heart of your memoir. Okay, the second thing that I see so many first-time authors struggle with is that they will get so caught up in the facts and forget that the reason people are reading is for the truth. Now, I have a whole video on this. This is several months ago. Why the truth matters more than facts in memoir. If you are writing a memoir, you should absolutely go check out that video as soon as you're done with this one. When I talk about facts versus truth, I am talking about facts as the concrete, very specific details. So these are things like years, places, people's names, the exact things that people said to you, the exact kind of lines of dialogue, for instance, that what song was playing, what was being cooked on the stove during this conversation. Facts, right? These are very specific, provable things. Truth, on the other hand, is much broader. Now, do not hear me say that the facts don't matter and that you can just lie. No, that is not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is a different type of distinction. That when we talk about truth versus facts, truth is something that is not provable, but it is so very real, right? The reality of the experience, the weight of what it felt like to be in that moment, that's not a fact. Different people are going to experience things different ways, right? But what we get when we use our truth, when we look at what something meant, what it felt like, what our recollection of that memory is, whether or not it fills in all of the gaps that we would expect from a fact, what we are doing is casting a much broader net. Now, let me give you an example here because I think it can be a little bit confusing to understand what we're talking about. So let's say that you wanted to, talk about a vacation that your family took to Cape Cod in the 1980s, and you get kind of caught up. This is what happens to so many people. Get kind of caught up in, going into Google and like, what was the name of that hotel? And then you're in Google Images and you're kind of looking at like all the pictures of the hotel. And this, by the way, can be a great way to kind of jog your memory. But what a lot of people will do is they will get so down the rabbit hole. They will end up, before they even feel like they can finalize the chapter outline, they are on the phone with everybody that they've ever talked to about this event. They're down this rabbit hole on Google. They're looking through their scrapbooks and photo albums in the weeds. Now, I can almost guarantee the reason that you are writing about that family vacation to Cape Cod is not because your reader wants to know the details of what color the carpet was and what foods were served in the restaurant. The reason your reader wants to know is because this feeling of being together as a family, of having an exploration, of being a kid and being somewhere new and getting to experience all of these sights and sounds and people who are different. I want to know that. I just kind of talked myself into this book. When we think about things like that, they're so relatable, right? We can read that author's story and we can project our own stories into that. This is why I call it the umbrella of truth. When we cast this truth as our kind of umbrella, we are inviting other people to come under that umbrella with us and share that experience of whatever the human thing you're experiencing, right? Whether that's a hardship or a really happy time or something in the middle, we're inviting them in. Facts will very, very rarely do this for you. And facts, the weeds, can very often bog you down in just feeling like everything has to be exactly perfect on the first draft. It's not true. So what do we do instead of this? Well, the first thing is, when you are writing that draft of your memoir, the truth is the thing you need to focus on. What did that thing feel like? What was really happening when you had that conversation with your mom or your dad or your uncle? What was really going on behind the scenes of that? How did it affect you? How did going through that experience reshape the way that you moved forward from there? These are truths, right? What is it that you really want to express? Because I guarantee it is not the exact words that Aunt Sally said to you before you went to lunch at that Cape Cod resort restaurant. Guarantee it. So we want to think about, what is the truth? What is the purpose? What's the thing you want to communicate? And then when you go back through and revise, which you're going to have to, right? Everyone has to revise. When you go back through and revise, that is the point at which you can decide which of those facts, which of those details really is going to move that truth forward. The reason we want to do it this way is that when you do your truth first, when you get the truth down of the story, you are often going to find that stuff you thought was so important to look up is not even in there. Once we write our truth, we do our revision, it turns out that whole scene got cut. Now, what if instead you'd been so focused on the facts of it that you spent hours down the rabbit hole of what the facts of that scene were? Number one, it's not ending up in there anyway. But number two, it's going to be so much harder and more painful to cut that scene because you spent so long looking stuff up. Okay, so this is why the second most common mistake I see in first-time memoirists is forgetting that the truth is way more important than the facts and getting sucked into this rabbit hole of the weeds. Get yourself out of there, write the truth, communicate the thing that is the purpose of the scene, not all the little details. Your reader will love you for it. Okay, number three, the third most common mistake that I see among first-time memoir writers is trying to use the book to get revenge. Oh, it's so tempting, right? Every memoir I have ever worked on, there has to be at least a scene or two. There's at least a moment or two where some person or something or some organization is going to try to derail you. That is what makes these inspirational memoirs so inspiring, is that we are going along, we're trying to fulfill this mission and our purpose in life. And at the same time, so many people are blocking our path, are hurting us in whatever way. Now, I have talked a lot about this. We have a video called How to Write Your Memoirs Villain Without Burning Bridges. That's a few months ago. It's a pretty popular video on this channel. And then I also have talked about how you can heal your trauma enough that you're going to be ready to write. Either of those videos might be useful. Go back and look them up on the channel. I promise that it's really good content in there. But what I want to say for the purposes of this video right now is that when you are setting out to write your memoir, it can be very, very tempting to name names. Now, you may end up naming names or you may not. But what I mean by this is that when we orient our writing self around trying to get back at someone, our entire focus is in the wrong place. I'm going to say it again. When we set ourselves up as writers around one other person, a person that did us wrong in some way, our focus is in the exact wrong place. When you are writing a memoir, we're going to go for the truth, right? And the truth is about you. Memoirs are about you. Memoirs are not about the people who hurt you any more than they are about the people that helped you. Memoirs are about you, your human experience. When that person did that horrible thing, how did you feel? What did it do to you? How did it change the way you understood the world? What was the truth behind that encounter? And the truth is always much larger, more complex, and frankly, more interesting than that person doing something to you. There always is something that's more interesting in the interaction between the two of you that has to be at the heart of the memoir. It's why your reader picked that book up, and really, it's what you set out to communicate. So, I want you to focus on your experience, but I want to add a little bonus tip here too. If you find that when you sit down to write, you are having a lot of kind of anger come up, a lot of frustration, irritation, however you would characterize it, these kind of like yucky, yucky feelings, these kind of bad, negative, we just don't feel very good when we're thinking of them, thinking these thoughts, feeling these feelings. If that is like you, I want to suggest that you step away for a little bit. I know this is a channel on writing. My goal is to get you moving forward on your goals. Here's the thing. If you find that you are so oriented toward getting back at others through this memoir, you are also going to find that the end result is not going to be very good. I've seen it over and over. People try to write these memoirs, they get caught up in something they haven't really resolved in themselves yet. And what they end up with is a draft that really doesn't have any truth to it. There's really no kind of central theme. There's no argument or communication in it. It is all just a gossip rag. So if you find yourself really wanting to focus on the people that hurt you, take a step back, get in some, therapy or some counseling or whatever that might look like for you. Work through that issue, because once you do, you're going to feel so much better about the words that you get on the page. Okay, make sure you're not getting revenge. This is a really, really important one. And not just for legal reasons, which I know people think a lot of times, also because of the quality of your book. Number 4, the fourth most common mistake that I see first-time memoir writers make is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum to the last one, which is that they really want to please everyone. Now, there are 2 ways this can show up. I want to talk a little bit about each of them. The first way this can show up is that you really want to make sure that when you tell these stories about other people, that everyone is going to agree with you in terms of how it happened and what it meant. Now, if you have spent much time talking with people about your life or their life or experiences, you know that we all can be at the exact same event. 100 of us there. And there can be 100 stories for what happened, why, what it meant. As humans, we are constantly filtering every single thing we see, read, hear, experience through all of the past experiences that we have had in our lifetimes. Now, even if you are a twin, an identical twin, you do not have identical experiences with literally anybody else, right? And what that means is that when you are writing your memoir, if you are trying to get other people's input, you're trying to make sure, you're super fair to everybody else's experience and you really want to represent what they saw and what they heard, what you will find is that you yourself will get lost. You will end up, not only will you end up with a pretty tepid description, right? Because you won't feel like you can really commit to anything. It'll be kind of lukewarm. You also just will find that there's no there. If you try to put yourself second to all these other people's experiences, there really isn't going to be any truth, and that means there really isn't going to be any draw. You're kind of just trying to be fair to everybody at the expense of being fair to yourself. So we certainly do not want to do that. Now, the second way that I have seen this come up, and this is a little bit later, so if you're just starting, this probably won't be a mistake for you, but file it away for later. It will come up. The second thing I see happen is that when you are going through the revisions first and then the copy edits, when that book is kind of getting wrapped up, you're moving on to kind of being finished and on to publication. A lot of times people will start to kind of, when they're reading their draft back, they will start to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't shout out this person and they were so encouraging to me. And you know what? I want them in there by name. I hear that exact phrasing all the time. I want that person in there by name. They were really important to me. Friends, when you do this, you are getting sucked down that exact same rabbit hole of the weeds, the facts, right? We are wanting to make sure that we get everybody in there so that everybody can really feel very special and included in our book. I love that impulse. I love it because no doubt these people really did shape who you are. They really did step in with a helping hand when you needed it most. Or honestly, sometimes it's just a really good person that doesn't even have all that much to do with the story, but they went to your church, you were really good friends with them, they babysat you when you were a kid. We're going to get all that in there. There is a time and a place for naming all the people who helped you. It's the acknowledgments. So that is actually such a good tip because it makes your work so much easier. When you save that stuff for your acknowledgement section, two things happen. One, you are able to stick to the truth, not put in a whole bunch of extraneous detail that isn't moving your story forward in the form of names, descriptions, birth dates, locations, children, that kind of thing. But also, I will tell you, people will be so much more moved to have been thanked in your acknowledgments than they will be to have played a character in your book. Every time. I see this every time. I feel it, by the way. People thank me in their acknowledgments, and it is like, oh, even if I knew they were going to do it, even if, I played a pretty instrumental role in their book, there is just no feeling like being thanked for something that is just a really cool accomplishment, right? This person wrote this book and they published this book and they thanked you. So what you need to do, reverse engineer this, right? Remind yourself that the people who are really important to your community, important to your story, important to your growth, thank them in your acknowledgments. Give them a shout out there. Shout them out on your social media when you're kind of promoting your book, right? But when you try to put it in the book itself, what you are really doing is a kind of form of people pleasing that really is going to undermine what you're trying to do with the book. So, number 4, really try to make sure that you are not oriented toward keeping everybody else happy in the same way that we're making sure we're not oriented toward getting revenge against other people. Okay, number 5, our last tip. I promise you, this is a big one, and this is one I see all the time. And it is one that will totally derail you before you even get started. Okay, the 5th mistake I see is trying to go it alone. Now, if you have tried to write your memoir, and I know many of you have, many of you, I would venture a guess, have tried multiple times over probably quite a few years. I hear this all the time, so just taking a little educated guess here. What you will often find is that if you don't let other people into the world of your writing journey, It's just too easy to give up. That's it. So what I'll see sometimes is that people will try to even keep it a secret that they're writing a book. That's at kind of one extreme, is that they don't want to tell anybody because then if you don't finish it, no one has to know, right? Unfortunately, that also means that you haven't set yourself up with any kind of community expectations for what you're doing. You haven't set yourself up to get encouragement. You haven't set yourself up to kind of get little reminders if you're off track, and usually in the form of people asking you how it's going. But also, most of us need some external motivation. Most of us need to have someone who is kind of looking out for us, really who knows how important the project is to us, because every single person I've ever known that wrote a book of any kind forgot at one point or another how important that project was to them. It's an easy thing to let happen, right? Books take a really, really long time, and usually between the time we start and the time we finished, many months have passed, and we have moved through these stages of excitement to disappointment to struggle to victory, all of the different stages of emotion. When we don't have anyone that is watching our back, making sure when we are at those low points that we have that motivation and that encouragement to move forward, you make your job so much harder. So the solution to this one is pretty easy, honestly. We have got to get some accountability in there. There are tons of ways that you can do this. The simplest, I talked about this a few weeks ago, is to get yourself an accountability buddy. There's a made-up term that my grad school friends and I had. Essentially just someone who is going to check in on you based on what you're hoping to get done. If you're wanting to write a chapter a week, chapter every 2 weeks, whatever that might be, you let that person know what your schedule is and you ask them to just shoot you a text. See how it's going. It could be something a little bit more structured than that. You might join a writing group, a local writing group, where if you don't show up, people are going to notice you're not there, and that's going to kind of keep you going. You might join kind of a more structured group. We have the Memoir Method. That's exactly, the purpose. We have training in there and encouragement. But a big piece of it is just the accountability too, that sometimes you just need somebody to check in on you. So with the Memoir Method, you get 2 check-ins a week, where one of them is by email, one of them is by call, so that you are constantly being asked, how is it going? Where can we help you? Tons of other ways you can do this. Whatever you choose, though, to finish your memoir effectively and efficiently and in a way that feels really good, you are going to need support. You need support during the writing process just as much as you need the support of an editor. So do not wait. Write now. If you don't have anyone to hold you accountable, get someone. It can be a friend, it can be a group, it can be a structured program. Whatever it is, you have got to have somebody that's checking in on you. 9 times out of 10, if you don't have anybody that even knows what you're doing, you're just not going to be able to do it. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. All of these mistakes are very, very easy to overcome. You can do this. I just want to make sure that as you're moving through, you have all the tools and all the support that you need to make sure this is an enjoyable process. Writing your memoir can change your life, not only in the things that you get from becoming a published author, but also, and maybe even more so, from just the reward of understanding yourself better, of having a much clearer sense of why you went through what you went through and what it did for you in terms of your outlook, in terms of your perspective, and in terms of your life moving forward. Okay, I cannot wait to see you making some progress on this memoir. It is going to be amazing. Reach out if I can help. Happy writing.
Writing your memoir can be one of the most rewarding, fulfilling, beneficial tasks that you can take on in this lifetime. But unfortunately, it can also be kind of a slog, especially if you don't know how to plan your time. And that is why my team has put together an absolutely free resource called the Memoir Method Checklist. This checklist is going to take you through every single step you need from that very first seed of an idea all the way through publishing that book and holding it in your hands. We're going to give you the steps, we're going to give you the timeline, and we are going to make sure that you always know where you're going, even a step before you get there. You can download this resource for free at pageandpodium.com/checklist. And once you do, let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you, hear about your book, and hear about how your writing is going.